You're listening to Tabletop Arcanum, a podcast dedicated to learning and exploring the hobby of tabletop gaming. Your hosts are Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, so sit back and relax as we talk, discuss, and joke our way through the hobby we love so much.
Big tasks, little batteries. Program lovable robots with your friends. Complete each challenge before battery power runs out. Adorable robo-friends need your help. Chase down naughty dust bunnies with Gizmo. Thwart pesky ants in Twirl's garden. Dig up hidden dino bones with Rover. And serve hungry diners in Lefty's restaurant. Welcome to Tabletop Arcanum. We're your hosts,
Justin
and Ricky. Today we are talking about Quirky Circuits.
This is put out by Plaid Hat Games, designed by Nikki Valens. Plays 2 to 4 players, 15 to 30 minutes per scenario. Suggested age 8 up, and MSRP is at $49.95. Let's talk about our first impressions on this one. It is a bright, colorful, cutesy box, standard size game box. It's got spot gloss on like the Gizmo cat character, the dust bunny, and the name, so it kind of stands out. This is part of Plaid Hat's storybook style games. If you're familiar with Stuffed Fables, Comanauts, and Forgotten Waters, they all kind of have this spiral bound book that has the scenarios and the location, and you kind of play on the book instead of a traditional game board.
Yeah.
The minis that come with them is you get 1 mini for each robot. Gizmo the cat, who rides like a Roomba. There's also Twirl, which is like a bumblebee robot that picks up and carries things. And Lefty, the sushi robot with a obnoxiously long left arm and a regular sized right arm. So they come with these models. They're very cool, moderately detailed for the size. Something I would definitely look to paint up. Then on the board, they have like even more presence. What other first impressions do you have on this?
I know I just keep talking about carrying games around.
You just
with
want to
me
condense
everywhere.
everything.
Yeah, the tokens are pretty small. You got a deck of cards, 2 bigger cards that just give descriptions of each robot, and then you have the 4 minis themselves with the book.
You could take this all individually and backpack it pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
Worst case scenario, if you knew you only wanted to play Gizmo scenarios, you could bring Gizmo his cards, and that's it. Because each robot has their own little deck of cards for their actions. The primary mechanic of the game is cooperative action programming.
Silent cooperative action programming.
The biggest action programming game I always kind of bring up and think about is Robo Rally, where you're doing a race against robots. So everyone controls their own individual robot and doing your own actions. So this one is cooperative. Everybody's controlling the one robot in the scenario, but then we're trying to coordinate what it's doing without talking to each other and playing these cards with a little bit of context clue on the back, but not enough to really know what's going on. So you have to figure out a groove with your group, which is great. I like it for that. The very first scenario, you're playing with Gizmo and trying to clean up dust bunnies. So literally, you're just trying to vacuum a house. And like, it's entertaining to work as a group to try to move this robot vacuum around the house without screwing up. Because every round, you lose a little bit of battery and you have to complete your task before the battery runs out. And it's a win or lose co-op game in that sense. The other good thing that it does, it is very rules light. The scenario twists the rules around a little bit. And the other thing it does well is we played the first couple scenarios and then we kind of made sure we touched all the different robots too when we were preparing for the review. But like the first scenario, Dust Bunnies, is about as bare bones as the game can get. Fragile Vases, which is the scenario right after that, adds a little bit more complexity, changes the map a little bit, but not too much, just like a little step forward. And the scenario after that changes it up a little bit more, adds another element that you have to tangle with. So it's kind of reminiscent of the Harry Potter Battle for Hogwarts deck building, where each game progressed your complexity a little bit until we were playing the later scenarios where it was like, here's a whole bunch of stuff you got to figure out and deal with. But if you've been progressing through the book, you've learned some of the basic skills, you've mastered some of those before they start adding the more complex stuff to it. The scenarios are set up in a smart way. They're also very interesting and kind of fun. Like, one was Dust Bunnies, one was like, yes, we're doing Dust Bunnies, but we're in a different room of the house and now there's end tables with vases on them. And if you bump into the table, it falls off and breaks and you have to clean it up, which I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like,
I know at least the Roomba is destroying the evidence of everything it's breaking around the house. The one thing I also really enjoy about this is you will never have a game that's the same because there's just so much variances playing it that you really can't replicate anything. To the point that when we're all playing it, after 3 of us throwing out cards, we get to the end of it and we look at the board and we are sitting in the exact same place that we started and haven't done anything.
Yeah, those were actually really entertaining turns of like, you know what we did? We just kind of like moved forward, rotated, moved back, rotated, moved forward again. Just like, whatever.
I do enjoy the fact that you have 4 different robots and all of them have different rules to them.
They play differently.
Yeah, they play differently. And, they make sense, which is fantastic, where you have Gizmo, if he hits anything, he's going to turn left. And that's just like a Roomba. You had Twirl that if...
loses battery when she runs into things.
Which makes sense. You run into something, you're going to have to, readjust the flight pattern, so on and so forth. Rover jumps, so he interacts with barriers a lot differently than the rest. And then Lefty, again, left arm that's 2 spaces long, right arm that's 1 space long. So you're working on trying to make sure that you don't accidentally throw dishes away while you're serving others.
Right.
All of them have a little bit of difference to them, and it keeps the game interesting going from one to the other.
Yeah, there's a lot of really neat stuff going on with it. And then the more advanced rooms, you're adding like real live cats into the mix, and the cats are screwing around with the robots. Like, it's such a cool concept of a game, and I held off on getting this one for a while. As soon as it came out, it was announced, I went, that's a cool game. Like, Stuffed Fables is a little on the creepy Nightmare Before Christmas vibe sort of thing, but this is like so fun, family oriented, and cute that I'm like, this is something my wife would dig into. Like, she likes the lighter, colorful, fun games. She's not going to play Arkham Horror where, like, do you want to hate yourself? And, like, a win feels like, well, we didn't die, so we technically won, right? She, that's not her game. So, like, I immediately saw this and thought of, like, this is your gaming couples game. This is your game where if you don't like the dark, heavy, and handed stuff and you want a nice, fun co-op game, well, this is it. Ironically, Nikki, who designed this one, also was the main designer for Eldritch Horror. So that also caught my interest, personally. I'm like, well, I'm a big Eldritch Horror fan. Let me see what Nikki can do
in a bright, colorful world.
In a different setup, and it does well. Let's talk about some of the challenges, I guess. We always like to talk about the good and the bad, and I have yet to meet the perfect game.
No, we only have a finite amount of puzzles to go through, so it will be...
There's a lot of scenarios, but there is only these scenarios. And only the later ones start becoming a little interesting in the sense of only a few of them say, pick which robot you want to use. They may say, like, okay, you can use Twirl or Rover here. And I would have liked to see a little bit more of those. Not a lot more, just a few more of those, where I can play this scenario with Twirl and get one experience out of it, or we could play it as Rover and get a different experience out of the same scenario. So some of that I would have liked to see a little bit more. The scenarios are definitely designed around the specific robots, which is both a good and bad thing.
Yeah, so Lefty's really not going to be able to be used for anything other than
Lefty-style scenarios.
Yeah.
And likewise, while that's good, that does mean Lefty scenarios are pretty much stuck to Lefty scenarios, and if you really like Lefty, you get like a quarter of the book. Likewise, if you don't like Lefty, there's like a quarter of the book that you're never going to play again. It's not a great thing, but like I didn't like how Twirl played and how Twirl moved around, so I would be less inclined to play Twirl scenarios. Like I will be playing through all of them and making sure I beat all of them, but I don't know if I would go, yeah, let's play a Twirl scenario. As far as components go, the book itself has a very heavy cardstock front and back to it, but the individual scenario meat, the interior pages, are a little on the thin side for where I would have liked it. I would have liked a little bit heavier weight paper because you are playing on it. Is it the worst I've seen? No. Since this is a little bit more younger audiences, I think a little bit heavier quality paper may survive a little bit longer. It's just one of those things, if you're flipping and using this book, I want to make sure this lasts. And likewise, the tokens and the models are the other thing I think that component-wise could have used a little bit more love. So the tokens are nicely small size. However, everyone but Gizmo interacts with the tokens by literally picking them up and putting them down. And they have little handholds, or in Rover's case, his mouth. But like in our little few games, I've already seen some of the tokens come away damaged with Twirl's clamp hands, because it's not quite modeled perfectly. So maybe a little bit more durability on the tokens, or something of that nature, or some way where it's not necessarily the tokens clipped into hands, but like Rover's I think is the best because it kind of like slots into his mouth and just kind of sits there. It's just one of those wear and tear, and if you have kids, that's going to get even worse before it gets any better.
So $49.95. How do you feel about the MSRP?
It is about what I expect out of a game. It gets a lot of replay value in the sense of there's a lot of scenarios to go through to start with. You may not get the replay value in an individual scenario, but you have a lot of them to run through. Component-wise, I would expect a little bit more. If this was a $40 game, I would be a little bit more comfortable with it. It's not too bad, but it could be a little bit better. If the token quality was upgraded a little bit, if the scenario book was a little bit heavier stock paper, then I think I'd be fine at $49.95. Now, who would you recommend this game for?
I definitely recommend this for families, people who want to just have a nice game night, people who want to have a co-op experience.
If you want a cooperative action planning game, this is a good game for that. If you're looking for a good action planning game, I think Robo Rally is a little bit better in the action programming, but it's a lot more competitive. But for the family action programming game, this is the one.
I would not suggest this for anyone who would get upset having to rely on other people. You can have everything planned out in your head, and it's one of those games where whoever throws it out first, it's out there. You could have your everything in your head, putting it down, someone plays a card, that just messes up your entire turn, you have no idea what's going to happen after that.
To kind of piggyback on that one, if you have a problem relying on others to make that strategy work without talking about the strategy at all, it's going to be a rough and challenging experience for you. The other person that I'm going to say probably should pass on this game is... if you're not good when things go wrong and you don't like that loss of control, this is not going to be a fun game for you. I think that's the charm of the game, is like, all right, we did the best we can, and we pretty much sat around and spun in circles for like all of that turn, and now we have to really struggle. So that's our take on Quirky Circuits by Blighthead Games. If you like our reviews, make sure you hit us up on social media like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're on those.
We're also doing stuff on Twitch and YouTube. If you want live updates, make sure to get a ticket to ride a midnight train going anywhere.
This has been Justin.
And Ricky.
And I'm cutting you off before that goes anywhere else. Happy gaming, everybody.
You've been listening to Tabletop Arcanum, hosted by Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, and featuring the original music by Paul Moore and Isaac Gilbert. You can follow us on most social media platforms. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. As always, thanks for listening.